Question 2 in the Superpowers paper will ask you how useful are sources B and C to a historian studying a specific event. That question stem will always stay the same. They could ask you about any event on the course. It's worth 12 marks, so again, we ideally need 3 paragraphs where possible, with one paragraph looking at one of the sources, one paragraph looking at another, and a conclusion. And we want to be spending about 15 minutes on this question. Now, both these sources will be linked to the same event, and really it's similar skills to that first superpower question. We look for the message of the source, we back it up by proving it by linking it to the source with a quote or a description, and then we bring in our own knowledge of the event as well. So let's look at this practice question here. We're studying the impacts of the Berlin Wall in 1961. And we've got these two sources to work with. We have got from Khrushchev's memoirs published in 1971. The establishment of border control in 1961 straightened things out at once. Discipline in East Germany increased. Factories began working better. So did collective farms. Comrade Ulbricht informed us that there were immediate improvements in the economy of East Germany. The population of West Berlin had been shopping for food in East Berlin, taking advantage of lower prices there. And then we've got Source C. This is a cartoon by Don Wright for the Miami News in 1961. Now we've got the Berlin Wall being built up with a lot of dead bodies on the top, people who've tried to escape. And on top of those bodies, we have got Khrushchev, and Khrushchev is saying, "See how many are staying on our side." Okay, so our first step is again that planning. Look at both sources and just make notes like you did for the first question. Similar things. What's the overall message? What are they saying about the event in the question? Is one side being blamed or being shown as good? Is an action being justified that it was the correct thing to do? Let's look at this first source then, source B. And when it's a written source, there might be some key terms that you're not sure on. If you're not sure on what it's saying, just try and pick out a few sentences, if nothing else, and try and work at the general message of the source. Here, the overall message is that the USSR benefited from the Berlin Wall being constructed, that there was a positive impact, remember, impact the focus of our question, and helped them to regain control of their territory in Germany. The wall is justified, and it's protecting the people of East Berlin from the West. If we do the same for source C, the overall message is that the USSR benefited from the Berlin Wall again, but it stopped people from leaving. It had a negative impact. The wall is being shown as inhumane here, trapping people in the prison and killing those who want to escape. And it's blaming Khrushchev for the wall and for the deaths. It's saying that the USSR are forcing communism on people who clearly do not want it. Now we're still in our planning stage here. If you are looking for that level 4 answer, 10, 11 or 12 marks out of 12, you're looking for that grade 8 to 9, you need to think about the provenance of each as well as the content, and why does the provenance make it more useful? So Khrushchev's memoirs, well, Khrushchev was the person who ordered the wall. He was the USSR leader at the time. He would have known the situation, he would have known why the wall was needed, and he would have been told what the impact was afterwards. He's a good person to have got the information from. Just think about the next a little bit. It might be biased. He ordered the war. He needs to justify it as well. And in the cartoon, well, it's from the time, so it captures the moods of America. Don't just say it's a primary source so it's useful. Justify that. This shows what people in America were thinking about the war at the time. If it's a cartoon, it has to capture what's going on. With political cartoons, not really there to humour, it's to show the irony of a situation. And it only works if it's based on accuracy. So that means that this source is going to be more accurate as a result. It's going to be based on some truths. And again, this is an American point of view. They're an enemy of the USSR, so they're more likely to be negative. Okay, now we're at the writing stage. So we're going to start with source B. And like we did for our first question, we are going to explain what the message is. So I've just put here, source B could be useful to a historian studying the impacts of the Berlin Wall in 1961, as it shows how it helped the USSR to regain control of their territory in Germany and had a positive impact, I'm repeating that keyword, on a range of communist features there. So that's the message of the source, that's what it's trying to say. How do I know that? I know this, as the source says, discipline in East Germany increased. This shows that the USSR was able to tighten its control once people could no longer leave East Berlin. So again, like the first question, just a short quote or a short description. Now we're bringing our own knowledge in here. So I'm starting off with that key phrase, from my own knowledge, I know this is true, as the USSR was facing a large problem with people leaving East Berlin for West before the wall was built. This was known as the refugee crisis or the brain drain. Skilled workers were encouraged to leave by West for a capitalist society where they could earn more money. By 1960, over 3 million East Germans had gone to the West. The loss of so many people had a huge effect on industry and businesses. By 1961, thousands of people were leaving each day, and it was clear that East needed to take action. This was why the wall was built, to stop workers from leaving and stabilise the economy. This can be seen in the quote, immediate improvements in the economy of East Germany, as it stopped the skilled workers from leaving and solved the refugee crisis. It also stopped the West from buying cheaper communist goods from East Berlin, as now the wall stopped them from entering East Berlin. So we can see here, I've brought in quite a bit of detailed own knowledge to support. I've kept it relevant. We're keeping the focus on the impact of the Berlin Wall, why it was needed, what the impact was, what the situation was like before. And I've brought in just one other quote to sort of keep it going tight all together. You don't want this paragraph to be full of just quotes and then this is true as, quote, this is true as. Really, your exam is looking for to understand the entire message of the source. And like always, I just want to link back just to keep the focus there. Just a simple sentence, really. Overall, this source was useful to historians studying the impact of the Berlin Wall in 1961, as it shows the impact of the Berlin Wall on the economy of East Berlin. It shows the control the USSR established over their territory. Now, this is the paragraph again, so it just started off with the message, then where I got that from, just a quote, lots of my own knowledge there, lots of precise own knowledge, and then I'm just linking back afterwards. And if you are looking for a grade for, if you're just looking to get a level 2 answer, 15 minutes, planning it out, writing one good paragraph with lots of detail in will be enough to get those marks. But if we're looking for higher marks, we need to look at the other source as well. So just to recap of what we've got here, a cartoon with Khrushchev at the top. And so I start off exactly the same. Source C could also be useful to historians studying the impact of the Berlin Wall in 1961, as it shows the negative impact the construction of the wall had on Berlin society. I know this, as the source shows a number of dead bodies on top of the wall, showing people were still desperate to leave East Berlin and were often killed doing so. This shows that the Berlin Wall was trapping people in East Berlin. Using my own knowledge, I know that the Berlin Wall did have negative impacts on the people of East Berlin. People who did try to cross the wall still were killed, and this was used by the USA for propaganda. The Berlin Wall was a symbol that the USSR had trapped its people, and Kennedy used this wall to highlight the problems with communism. This is shown in the source, with Khrushchev ironically trying to promote communism, saying, "Look how many are on our side," whilst the source is indicating that these people are actually trapped and not staying in East Berlin by choice. Overall, the source was useful to historians studying the impacts of the Berlin Wall in 1961, as it shows the Western view of the wall and how it was created to trap people in communist countries. Again, that's just what that paragraph looks like there. Now, if we're looking for those higher grades, if we're looking for those high marks, we've written 2 really good paragraphs so far. We're now just going to add a small paragraph that looks at the provenances of both and why this makes them more useful. So I would just do something like this. I'd always try and keep it positive. You can talk about the negatives and why you have to be careful, but I'd probably just try and keep it positive here. The provenances of the sources would also make both more useful. Source B is written by Khrushchev and so was important as he ordered the construction of the wall. It creates a first-hand account into why he did this, and he would have had all the information about the impact the wall had on East Berlin. Source C is a political cartoon, and so is useful as it highlights the mood the USA had towards the wall. It is based on some elements of truth to work as a cartoon, and so is more useful as a result. Finally, we need to conclude. Why are both sources useful if they are studied together? So do they give 2 different viewpoints? Do they show the short and the long-term effects? So in conclusion, both sources B and C are useful for historians studying the impact of the Berlin Wall by themselves, but are more useful combined. So I always try to explain why they're better if you put them together. This is because one shows the impact from a Western point of view, with the negative consequences of people dying and being trapped, whilst the other shows an Eastern point of view, and the positives for the USSR, such as solving the refugee crisis. Therefore, both source B and C combined are very useful for historians studying the impact of the Berlin Wall in 1961, as they present a more complete picture of the impact, positive and negative. So what does the answer look like overall? There's our analysis of source B. Then we moved on to source C. And then we've got that provenance paragraph, we're looking for the higher grades, and then our conclusion afterwards. So just some final tips for this question. First of all, a source is always useful. Focus on what it does show. Sources aren't designed to tell you everything about an event. Don't go looking for what's missing. Focus on what's there. They will give you sources that are useful. If you write down, this source is not very useful, you're basically saying to the examiner you don't understand the source. They are useful. Work on why they're useful. Now, when you're writing your answer, you can bring in a few quotes to keep the focus on the source. You saw I did that with both paragraphs. But don't analyze every single line. Don't just start saying, the source says this is true as, next line. The source says this, I know this is true as. The examiner doesn't want that. The examiner is looking for you to show you've understood the entire message of the source. Following the structure will help you to do that. If you are looking at the provenance, focus on developing why it's useful. Don't just say it's a primary source and leave it at that. Think about how it shows the moods, the attitudes at the time. Who said it? Did they know a lot about what was going on? Like Stalin, we saw Khrushchev in this answer. Is it propaganda? If so, it's trying to convince people of a certain viewpoint. So what does that tell us about that society? Is it a cartoon? If so, they're trying to get a message across based on the truth. Is it from someone who is trying to get a certain agenda across, like a speech? And finally, you do not need to pick a source as more useful. The question hasn't asked for that at all. Instead, like we've done here in your conclusion, explain why both sources are more useful when studied together. Analyze briefly how they complement each other. They might be two views of the same event, or they might look at the short and the long-term effects of something. They will work better together. Explain how in your answer.